The world is undergoing a historic shift. Economic and political power are being rebalanced, and global stability is being tested like never before. Alliances that once seemed unshakable are cracking, while old rivals are finding common ground. For example, China, Japan, and South Korea are strengthening ties and even inviting India to collaborate. In this unpredictable landscape, nothing seems impossible anymore. With this uncertainty comes new threats, some seen, some lurking in the shadows. And one of the most alarming questions today is, could Russia be secretly helping Iran inch closer to nuclear weapons? Sounds like the plot of a Cold War thriller, right? But this isn't fiction. This is a growing, real-world concern. And as global dynamics shift, the stakes for humanity grow higher than ever. Could Russia actually provide nuclear assistance to Iran? And if it does, what would that mean for global security? Now, let's be honest, Russia isn't desperate. Not yet. It has fought an entire continent to a standstill and hasn't backed down. But what if that changes? What if Putin decides it's time to play his final, most dangerous card? A nuclear deal with Iran. Today, Iran is at the center of attention. Why? Because the country has been under immense pressure for years. This pressure isn't just economic, it's political, military, and diplomatic. For years, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been a global flashpoint. Sanctions, secret deals, international pressure, yet the nuclear question never seems to disappear. And now, after returning to the White House, Trump reinstated his maximum pressure policy on Iran to prevent it from developing nuclear weapons. His goal? To deny Iran any pathway to nuclear weapons, using pressure as leverage. And his method of achieving this? Economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and threats. Iran, however, is not buying it. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian dismissed Trump's demands with open mockery, stating, "Ordering us around now?" In that case, there's no need for negotiations. Do whatever you want. Iran's stance remained firm. It would not yield to pressure. Pezeshkian emphasized the country's desire for international relations, but rejected any form of humiliation, declaring, "Respect will be met with respect, but threats will not be tolerated." He also referenced Trump's treatment of Ukraine's Zelensky, asserting that Iran would never allow itself to be placed in a similar position. On the other hand, Trump made it clear, this situation with Iran will be dealt with, one way or another. Either through negotiations and a peace deal, or through a more forceful approach, which he hinted could mean military action. And if diplomacy fails? Well, in his view, the alternative would still solve the problem. Now, why would Iran ever trust the US again? In 2015, after years of exhausting negotiations, a nuclear deal was signed. Then, in 2018, Trump tore it up, reimposed sanctions, and expected Iran to simply comply. From Tehran's perspective, this wasn't about diplomacy, it was about control. And that withdrawal? It only pushed Iran closer to Russia and China, giving them more influence in the Middle East at Washington's expense. Washington doesn't just want Iran to stop enriching uranium. It wants Iran to stop developing certain weapons, avoid certain alliances, and curb its regional influence. To Iran, this feels less like diplomacy and more like an attempt to control or weaken the country. While the US may not explicitly seek to turn Iran into a puppet state, its actions are often perceived that way by Iranian leadership. But let's be realistic. Iran has no intention of playing along. And why should it? With the US doubling down on pressure, China and Russia are stepping in to fill the vacuum. On March 14, 2025, Beijing hosted a nuclear summit, bringing together Iran and Russia. This meeting followed Iran's rejection of a recent US proposal for negotiations on its nuclear program. So from Iran's perspective, who is really the more trustworthy partner? The country that signed a deal and stuck to it, or the country that tore it up? When it comes to commitment, Iran never abandoned Russia, especially when Moscow needed it most. As Russia became deeply entangled in its war with Ukraine and desperate for allies, Iran stepped in, fueling Russia's war machine with cheap drones, weapons, and supplies. And for that, Tehran will demand something big in return. In politics, nothing comes for free. Whispers are growing that Moscow and Tehran might be making a dangerous trade, and it won't be for Russian rubles. Sanctions have made those nearly useless. It won't be for oil. Iran already has plenty, and it certainly won't be for empty promises. So it will demand something bigger, something far more consequential. And guess what? It will want advanced nuclear weapons expertise. Now, if that happens, there's no stopping what comes next. Just imagine a world where Iran, already defiant and already pushing limits, gains access to Russian nuclear expertise. And let's be honest, if we're comparing Iran to Pakistan, even Pakistan looks like the obedient child. Whenever it gets a slap from China or the US, it sits down and behaves. But Iran, that's a whole different story. This is a country that has openly declared its intent to destroy Israel, a nation that has been a major supporter of terrorist groups, including the Houthis in Yemen. Now picture that same Iran, armed with Russian nuclear know-how. The Middle East wouldn't just be in crisis, it would become a ticking time bomb. The threat of war wouldn't just loom, it would be imminent. And once that line is crossed, there's no turning back. The world wouldn't just be on edge, it would be on the brink. So, what's the deal with the nuclear summit? On the surface, this trilateral meeting was all about diplomacy. China, Russia, and Iran standing together, pushing back against US policies, and discussing Iran's nuclear issue. But what happened behind closed doors? No one knows. Could have been simple diplomacy, could have been military deals, or maybe, just maybe, Russia and Iran had a little chat about nuclear technology. Now, would Russia actually want Iran to have nukes? Probably not. A nuclear Iran could create regional instability, and that could come back to bite Moscow. But under the right circumstances, Russia might just see it as a useful bargaining chip. Leverage against the West, a way to counter US influence, and another step in strengthening the anti-Western bloc. Now about China. Beijing has zero interest in Iran going nuclear. Here's why. China wants to be a superpower, not a supervillain. A nuclear Iran would destabilize the Middle East, threatening China's vital energy supply. It would also spark an arms race, pushing Saudi Arabia and Turkey to go nuclear, turning the region into a ticking time bomb. And let's be real, China isn't looking to pick unnecessary fights, except maybe over Taiwan. That's a different game, all about military control and dominance in the seas. But backing a nuclear Iran? That's just bad business. So instead, it will try to balance good ties with the US, Europe, and Israel for trade and diplomacy. The last thing Beijing needs is to back a move that could throw one of its key economic lifelines into chaos. What happens? If Iran goes nuclear, World War I was fought with rifles and trenches. World War II brought tanks and bombs. But World War III, it wouldn't be fought with soldiers on battlefields, it would be fought with nuclear fire. If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, the Middle East could spiral into chaos. This wouldn't just be a regional issue, it would have global consequences, potentially triggering World War III. And here's why. Iran isn't exactly the picture of stability. US and EU sanctions have crippled its economy, and its proxy wars in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon make it a prime target for retaliation, especially from Israel. But here's the real nightmare. If Iran gets nukes, who's really in control? With internal chaos, extremist factions, or even terrorist groups could get their hands on nuclear tech. And if Russia steps in to help, Iran will see itself as a regional superpower, pushing the whole region closer to war. Israel won't sit back. It could strike first, dragging the US and NATO into full-scale conflict. A nuclear Iran wouldn't prevent war, it would make it inevitable. And so, the world would become even more unstable, conflicts would be more frequent, deadlier, and nearly impossible to control.